In the last few videos about AWS in Tech Primers, we just saw how to use EC2 instance and Elastic Beanstalk instance till now. Let's try creating a Lambda along with an API gateway to see how we can leverage the latest power of serverless technology in the AWS space. Let's get started.
Press the bell icon on the YouTube app and never miss any updates from Tech Primers.
Before getting into the hands-on on how to use the console and creating an AWS Lambda, let's look at the architecture on how we are going to design a Lambda and what are the different components inside the AWS space which we're going to try out in this particular video. So obviously we will be having a AWS Lambda created. So we are going to create a new function. Basically, this is a function as a service. So if you are not sure about what is AWS Lambda, do check some videos on what is AWS Lambda. I have made a video on what is serverless technology. You can take a look at that to understand what do I mean by AWS Lambda. So in order to access this Lambda, we need to have this Lambda code placed somewhere. So in our case, we are going to use GitHub. However, from GitHub, the code needs to be pushed to Amazon S3's environment. So we are going to use Amazon S3 bucket. So that is where the code or the jar will reside. So I'm going to manually build my jar, the artifacts, and I'm going to upload it to the S3 bucket. From the S3 bucket, for every call or the trigger which you're going to hit for triggering a Lambda, the jar will be loaded from the S3 store and then it will be loaded onto an EC2 instance in the background and our Lambda code will be hit from there. So in order to access this particular Lambda, we need to hit this particular Lambda, right? So there should be some trigger in order to kick off this particular event, which triggers the Lambda to be started, which is stored in the S3 bucket, obviously. So all these reside in the AWS infrastructure. So in order to access this particular AWS Lambda, we can either create a gateway or you can have some kind of triggers based on some events. So in this particular video, we're going to create a AWS API gateway in order to access this particular Lambda. So we're going to create an API called Lambda-API, and if you hit that Lambda-API, it is going to trigger your AWS Lambda. And in order to monitor these gateway component and the Lambda component, we are going to use the AWS CloudWatch, which is where the logs are going to reside. So the logs will be streamed from the Lambda to the CloudWatch and same way from the gateway to the CloudWatch. So we can configure the AWS CloudWatch to get logging information and other metrics information from this particular Lambda and the API gateway. So we are going to configure that as well. Now coming to the implementation part, I have the AWS free tier account. So I have it for Tech Primers here. So I have my account, which is free. You can also try out whatever I'm trying. You won't be charged because there are 1 million hits per month, which are free for AWS Lambda and you can use it. And for S3 bucket, you can store up to 5 gig of data in the S3 bucket. So you can go ahead and use it in the free tier itself. I'm going to create a Lambda function using Java. You have lots of examples in the internet for the Node.js app or the Python app. I'm going to create a Java application and show you how you can deploy a Lambda which is based out of Java code. I'm going to create a simple Maven application and I'm going to use the AWS Lambda Core SDK in order to use the Lambdas. So I'll show you how to do that. I'm going to create a Maven project from the archetype. This is going to be a plain Maven project. So I'm going to create the quick start Maven archetype. I'm going to give the group ID as com tech primers slash AWS and the artifact name is lambda hyphen java hyphen API hyphen example. So the version is 1.0 snapshot and this is going to use my bundled Maven and I'll give some naming convention here so that I'll finish the project and this should open up a small Java project which is basically a Maven project. So the Maven project got loaded. We have com tech primers AWS. I think there should be an app file. Yeah, so there is some app file. Let me configure the Java version here. I think I have it correct. Modules, let's go to the modules and then check it. Yep, so we have the Java configured here. Let's go to the POM XML. In the POM XML, we can notice that there are different versions of the POM. Let me align it. So there are different examples. So the name of this particular project is Java Lambda Java API example, and then there is some URL. I'll just remove this URL. We already have the group ID artifact, and we also have the compiler set. We wanted to use the Java 8 version, so I'll just say 1.8. So there is a dependency section. You can see that there are tests right now. We wanted to add the AWS Lambda core SDK. I already have the Lambda core SDK loaded as a part of my live template. So whatever I typed here, this is just the live template. I already loaded it into my IntelliJ as a template. So this is the Lambda dependency which you need to use so that I can access the SDK interfaces, classes, and other things which are coming up with this particular core library. So I'll just show you what I'm going to use. Also, we need the Maven shade plugin so that we can build our artifact. So I'm going to use the Maven shade plugin, and also I'm going to remove all these guys which are there here, and I'm going to use the Maven compiler plugin as well. So the Maven compiler plugin is going to use the Java 1.8, and the Maven shade plugin is going to build my artifact with the dependencies, and it is going to compress me into a package. So my POM is ready. I only have the dependency. Now coming to the application. So I have an public class called app. Let me remove this. I'll remove the corresponding test as well so that it doesn't complain me later. I'll create a Java class, and I'm going to calling this class as Lambda Java API. So this is the class which I'm going to use, and in order to write the implementation code for AWS Lambda, we need to implement the interface called as request handler. So this is nothing but the Lambda request which we need to handle. So the signature says input comma output. The input could be anything. So here I'm going to not bother about the input. However, I need to bother about the output. So this output is nothing but the response which we will be pushing it back to the UI, because here we have a AWS gateway. So we need to create a response in such a way that the gateway is going to understand it. So in order to make the gateway understand it, we need to create a Pojo. I'm going to create a gateway response Pojo. So I'm going to create this class called gateway response, and this class is going to have some model. So basically it needs to have a message, right? It needs to have a body. It needs to have some status code because it's defined by the API gateway, because API gateway needs a status code, and the body which is nothing but the message, and also it needs the headers. So the headers could be of type string comma string. Also it needs the is base 64 encoded. So we need to send whether this particular message is base 64 encoded so that the API gateway can understand whether this is encoded or not. So here I'm going to use the IntelliJ's code generator to create all my getters and setters, and also the constructor. I'll just create a constructor with all my fields. So you can also create a builder if you are interested in having a clean code. You can create a builder out of it as well. I'm not going to create a builder, but I'm going to implement this particular method in this particular class. So we have implemented this particular method called handle request, which is coming from this particular interface. So in order to use this particular method, we will have to write some piece of code. Here I'm going to use the logging statement. I'm just going to log saying hello from YouTube, and I want to send the same message back to the response. So I'm just going to say this is the message. Hello from YouTube is going to be sent back to the UI. So I'm going to send this particular message back. So in order to send the message back, we need a gateway response. So we need a gateway response. In order to get the gateway response, we need to have the argument. So what is the first message? The first message is nothing but the body and the status code. So the body is nothing but the message. The status code is 200. I'm going to send 200 message because this is going to be a successful response. You can even send 404 or something else if you want to validate a message, and then you can send it back with a different status code. So for the header, I'm going to say collections.singleton map. I'm going to send a map with some information, right? So I'm going to say x hyphen powered by something something, right? So I'm just going to send this message back. I'm going to send powered by tech primers. This is just a header which I'm sending back, and also I'm going to send false because this is not a base64 encoded message. So whatever we are sending here is just wrapped up into a gateway response, which is nothing but this particular POJO, and then sent back to the API gateway, because the API gateway will understand only this particular type of message format. Now the project is done. Let's go and create a package out of it. I'm going to run the clean package. This is going to create a jar file for us, and this jar file needs to be uploaded to the S3. So this is where we will be placing the file. So let's go to the console. So meanwhile the project is getting built, let's go to the console. We can go to Lambda. So you can search for Lambda in the services. So in the services you can search for Lambda. You can create a function here. So hit on the create function option. This will allow you to create a lambda from scratch, or you can create as a blueprint. So if you create it as a blueprint, it will show you some predefined examples which are already uploaded in AWS, and you can use it. But you won't find many examples for Java. So that is why I'm creating something from scratch. So this is what I'm selecting here. Start with a simple hello world example. So this is what I'm starting. I'm creating something from scratch. I'm going to name my function. I'm going to name the function as lambda hyphen API hyphen Java hyphen example. I'll just make it as lowercase just to be in sync. And the runtime which I'm going to use is Java, right? Java 8. There is something called as permission. So you can provide some execution roles. So if you have any existing role, you can select some existing role, or you can create a new role for your project. So I'm going to use a new role. So create a new role using Lambda permission. So this is what I'm providing. I'm asking the Lambdas to create a new role with the Lambda specific permissions. So Lambda will create if you notice here, what it says is Lambda will create an execution role named Lambda API execution role, whatever, with permission to upload logs to Amazon CloudWatch. So notice that this is giving only access to the Lambda to upload to the CloudWatch. So let's create this function. So once we create this function, there will be a basic sample program which will be linked, and we can try hitting that program. So before we upload our jar, so whatever we built here in IntelliJ, we need to upload this into the Lambda function, right? So we are not going to do that. However, we are going to see what is the basic program which is already there. So see here, this is how the Lambda function shows up. So there is basically a UI kind of stuff here which shows the flow, where you can see that the Amazon CloudWatch logs are plugged onto a Lambda, and there are some trigger options. So if you relate this to the diagram which we had here, the Lambda is present, the CloudWatch is done. We need to configure the trigger point. So the trigger point is nothing but the gateway. So you have options to add your trigger points here. These are different trigger points. You can have events, you can have queue messages, you can have commits trigger the Lambdas, you can have object creation in S3 which can trigger Lambdas. But in our case, we are going to add a API gateway, and you can configure the gateway by clicking this option. Once you click on this option, you have an option to select a new API or an existing API. We're going to create a new API, and you have to provide what kind of role you need to provide to that API gateway. So this particular REST endpoint which we are going to create, we are going to call it as lambda-API. However, you can secure this endpoint by providing some roles here. So you can provide some API keys to this particular endpoint, or you can make it open. So for us, we are going to make it open so that we can directly hit it. And also the API name needs to be provided. So I'm going to provide lambda-API, and I'm going to call my deployment stage as prod. So the URL will come like /prod/lambda-API. So I'm going to call it as prod, and that's what we need. And what are the different types of messages you want to get? I want everything, so I'll just say star/star. This is going to provide my content type. Done. So I have added my gateway, I have added my lambda. So right now there is nothing it's just a sample hello world program. So I'm just going to hit the save option. There is an option for us to test this particular Lambda before hitting the gateway URL. So there is an option here to configure some test events. So if you notice here, these are some test events. So I'm going to say test event JSON. So this is a test event JSON key 1, key 2, key 3, which is provided to this particular Lambda, which is already present. So this is the default Lambda which is present. So I'm going to hit the test option. This is going to call that Lambda which is already configured, and see that it returns the response hello from Lambda. So this is the configured response which is already there, and you can see that there is a status code, there is a body message. So there is an already existing Lambda code which says hello from Lambda, and we have tested it. Now to test it from the API gateway, you can hit this particular endpoint. So if I hit this particular endpoint, I need to get some message back. The message will be hello from Lambda. So this is what we expected, and that is what we got as well, right? Because this is what is returned here. And these are some of the log statements which we got from the Lambda. In order to see the logs, you can click on the AWS logs, and then you can go to the AWS CloudWatch here. So you can go to services and you can hit the CloudWatch. Let's go to CloudWatch. I'll open it in a new tab so that we can look at the logs, how they are showing up. So see that there are some logs on the API gateway, there are some S3 logs, there are some Lambda logs which are configured, and these are some stats on how you are accessing the data. So we already have the Lambda function here, and it shows how much code size and memory size is configured for it. So if you want to see the logs, you can go to the log section in the left side, and you can see different Lambdas. So these are different Lambdas which I had created, and the Lambda which we had created now is Lambda API Java example. See that this is the example. Right now the time is 7:49. And I can see the logs here. So this is how the logs are showing up. So if you remember, we added some log statement here, hello from YouTube, which will be printed in the log as well. So we will look at that in this particular log. So now we have to upload our code into the Lambda, right? So in order to do that, you have to click on this Lambda here, and it shows of different options for you to upload. So see that there is something called runtime, and then there is something called handler. So this is nothing but the package, then the class and the method which you need to call inside the jar file, and this is the default one which is present already. So that is where the hello from Lambda came in. However, we need to upload our code. I'm clicking on the upload option here. This will upload our Lambda whichever we have written. So this is where our Lambda was written. I'll go to target, and this is our jar file, whatever got generated as a part of this particular build here. So I have selected this Lambda Java API example, and also I need to change the handler. The handler is nothing but this. The package is this. I'll copy this, and I'll have to do a dot and then the class name. The class name is Lambda Java API. I have to do double colon, and I will need to give the method name. So handle request. So this is how you notify the Lambda saying whatever jar I had uploaded, this is my path of my handler which you need to trigger when there is an event. So this event could be a API gateway trigger here. So I've hit the save option. So our Lambda got saved. So there are different options for you to configure below. But meanwhile, let's test this particular Lambda. If you need to test it, you can have an option to trigger this test here, or you can have the SAM CLI to test it. So I'm not using the SAM CLI, I'm just using my console here directly because SAM CLI takes a while to set up. However, in order to make your API simple and test it quickly, you can use this particular test option here. So notice that hello from YouTube has come here as a body, and it is working. Now in order to test it with the API gateway, I'm going to go to this particular URL, the API gateway URL, and I'm going to refresh it. And notice that hello from YouTube came. Now if you need to modify this hello from YouTube to hello from Tech Primers, I'm just going to say hello from Tech Primers. I'm going to build it. Let me quickly build it. And I need to upload this new jar like how we did into the console. So there is a CLI, as I said. You can use the CLI to upload this particular jar file onto the Lambda. However, I'm going to show it from the console by doing a manual upload. but you can do it via CLI as well. So the build should have got succeeded right now. The build is successful. Now let's upload the jar file, the latest jar file. This is the latest jar file which got built now. And let me save it. Once you save it, it will be uploaded automatically to S3. So this is where I was mentioning that we will be uploading our code to S3. I'll show that in a while. Meanwhile, let's trigger this Lambda. I just uploaded it and then I'm going to trigger it. When I trigger it, you can notice that automatically hello from Tech Primus came in. So this is the API trigger which we were talking about. So API gateway is the route for us to access the AWS Lambda, and you can see the URL. This is the Lambda which we created. The AWS-API-Java example was the Lambda, and this is the staging which we created. If you want to have multiple environments, you can have different stages and publish the Lambda to different staging environment. So that is what this is. And right now I'm hosting it in my Mumbai availability zone. So you can have a different region and different availability zone, and you can deploy it in any region. You can still customize this particular AWS API gateway. You can go to service and then go to API gateway, and you can choose the API which we created. So the API which we created is here, lambda-API, and you can notice that this is the configuration which is present here. If you click on the any option, it shows how's the request redirected. So there is a lambda proxy which you can configure. If you want to have specific methods, you can create different methods. You can configure methods here, and then you can have it configured. If I click on this, you can see how will I configure. See this, you can configure a get specific method or a post specific method and redirect it to different lambdas, and then select the different lambda options here. So you can see different lambda options showing up here. See, you can select this and then save it. So this is the API gateway. So you can configure the Amazon API gateway to configure HTTP request or Lambda function triggers or mock services or AWS service, etc. So this is how you can use AWS Lambda and configure an API gateway in front of the Lambda and use the API gateway as a trigger to trigger the AWS Lambda. I hope you guys had a basic idea of how you can write AWS Lambda. You can also try this particular example with your free tier. Do register with a free tier and then try it out. It is pretty useful. Whatever I showed you, it's all free of cost. So you can go ahead and try it out in your AWS free tier account. If you have any questions or queries, do let me know. As always, if you like the video, go ahead and like it. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, go ahead and subscribe to it. Meet you again in the next video. Thank you very much.